Hey everyone, welcome to episode 12 of CollectFutbol Live. We're going to do a state of the market for December 2020. I'm here with Al. You've heard him in many episodes. LRay_collection on Instagram. Al, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Bill?
Man, crazy year ending this week. So looking forward to 2021 and see where the soccer market takes us, I guess.
Yeah, hopefully 2021 is a better year for everybody because this was a crazy year. But in some ways, in terms of soccer collecting, it was a great year, right? Like when you just think about, I was thinking last night of how a bunch of us were on that call and we were talking about, wow, these Messi cards are so low. They are where they were versus a few months ago. But then I was thinking, but from a year ago, I mean, it was still huge. These were still huge, prices for virtually everything. You know, so I think from when you take it, it depends which how you're looking at things, but certainly, the world has had a tough 2020. But if you had a lot of soccer cards, you probably doing pretty good in 2020 if that was your business. Which it's not for either one of us, but I'm sure that for some people, it was a good 2020 because soccer finally exploded.
Yeah, it's that's definitely exciting. If we were talking about this in March or even, I mean, definitely February, because I did a lot of like, checking up on everything in February. Like it's just insane the difference, and we've talked about it before, just like what caused it. I mean, obviously, the COVID lockdowns and everything did help, and just this huge bump in just card collecting in general. Like it's insane to me, honestly. Like it's just like how it just clicked, and it wasn't like this slow build up. It was just
Boom.
light switch hit, and here we are. And I thought that you and I have talked about that too, where we just kind of feel like, okay, well, even if we see like a gradual increase, you still have time to react. But it almost felt like you had to like react so quickly, or you weren't going to get the benefit of the switch turning on. And now you just gotta still figure out where the values are and that sort of thing. But there's still things you want regardless of value, and when those come up, you got to get them. So that's the challenging part as a collector.
Yeah.
But it was going to happen at some point in time. It just happened earlier than I think we expected.
Yeah, or frankly, in my case, wanted, right? Because when you still got a lot of stuff on, check off list, then it's kind of it just makes it more difficult and harder and more expensive to get things. I was reflecting, over the last, at the end of the year, you always reflect a little bit. And when I was thinking about like collections and soccer in particular, you could have the only sales that I know that were more than $50,000 for soccer cards were the PSA 9 Alpha in like an HA auction a couple years ago in 2018. That was in the World Cup boom and went for 50,000, and we're all like, "Oh my god!" Right? And then allegedly the 57 Pele, Zen Baseball, Bob said that he had sold that for close to 100,000 to the latest seller, but that wasn't a public sale, so you didn't really know if that was real. And I kind of was saying, no way. And then everything, there's only a handful of sales more than $10,000. Some Queagles in good grades and stuff like that, and you could still pick up really nice Messi rookies for a couple thousand. So it's just been a huge change and a cataclysmic shift in the overall market over the year. I'm sure we'll get into talk some of these more recent auctions and kind of what it means over the last few months, but the from one year to another year, it's just been like literally insane.
Yeah, just a huge seismic shift. And I mean, it's across the board too. Like everything's gone up at least I mean, even at a minimum, it's gone up 100%, right? Like, I mean, I think that's a low end of the range for most cards. But we can kind of break it down into segments. And I mean, I think that PWCC auction kind of displays that still. We look at like the pre-war stuff, and it's still, there's the Dixie Dean, the 1930 that went for $400 is a PSA 8.5, I believe. You can buy those raw for $30 pretty easily, maybe 40 if you want to take into account shipping. But it is in good condition. It's a high end of the range, and I think it does maybe prey on people who are a little less understanding of soccer cards from certain regions.
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about, I think you did last night, but just give people kind of your perspective on some of, different regions, high level, so that they can kind of be aware of.
Yeah. So most
don't buy that card. Don't buy that card.
Yeah. I think it's just more, the nations that were more collectible or collecting nations, the wealthier nations typically preserve those cards better because they had that, that sort of dynamic to the community and the collecting in general. Like, so you're looking at the UK, Germany, I guess, Spain to a point.
Right, you'd say Sweden, right? This is why we get all the high grade alphas, right?
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at like pre-war, so there's a lot less of that out there, but we do see it. So yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, that's going to probably translate throughout the eras. So yeah, definitely Sweden, which is also a wealthier country. So, you're just looking at, probably the less wealthy ones, just that they got thrown aside, or, there was wars, or there was all these different reasons why these cards didn't survive, or if they did, they're in pretty terrible shape. So, we've said this before on other shows, but like South America, a lot of Italy. What else? In
Spain, it's hard to get things above a 3-4. When you go in, certainly pre-war. Just because they had the Civil War going on. You got Franco, and then in Italy in the 1930s, the build up to World War II. Mussolini, they're issued with chocolates. So it's more of a kids market as opposed to cigarettes like in the UK, which would be in a more adult market. So I think there's a lot of factors that play into it, and in the end, it's all about supply, and I think the supply in those wealthier countries is much more. The conditions and the collector history was more save them in better shape, and that's why you're going to have better ones. Now that doesn't mean that if you love the Dixie Dean card, even though that I don't see how that was an 8.5, shouldn't necessarily get it, right? But again, I look at the card and I'm like, that's not an 8.5. Number one. Number two, you can buy raw for $30 to $50. I think that while I think there's been a decent consolidation of knowledge in the hobby since a lot of new people came, mostly in the post-war period, especially I'd say centering around 1958 with the Brazilian World Cup and Pele through common days, or now and through today, and all that stuff kind of pre-war. Certainly, it's still completely an unknown to most people. There's not a ton of great resources, and it's easy to make mistakes when you don't know that, because you can say, wow, it's a 100-year card, 100-year-old card in really good shape. It must be valuable. I would say, just like anything, don't make a broad-based statement and just stick to it, because that was one that should have been avoided by someone yesterday, unless they're just the ultimate Dixie Dean collector and they needed to have the highest grade, which I haven't met any of those guys.
Yeah, it's obviously going to people who are less educated about the hobby as a whole, right? Like they want to dip their toes in it. They see an old card and it's that great, and it's to them, maybe they deal in baseball or some other sport where they see what a 1930 common goes for, and they are using, different comparisons than we are. And so we're looking at it from a soccer market, and they're looking at it as a general hobby market, and so I can see where, and they're using the same thought process that we are in regards to like, well, the market's not going to get any, looser. It's going to tighten up because there's going to be so many more people that are interested in the cards that it's just a long-term investment that they feel like they're not going to lose out on, and they probably aren't. It's just going to be a while,
I think that's right. I think that's right. But if I'm a collector and I invest a little bit more time, I could save a lot of money
for sure.
I think if you wanted to just invest generally in the macro trend, like I was saying, yesterday, there's a bunch of great pickups, and I'm sure everybody who bought anything yesterday is going to be quite happy with that 6 years down the road, if that's their time frame. So, I think, and even with that Dean card, I think you'll be, happy with it, and you can get enjoyment out of it now because it generally, I think the photograph on it is generally attractive. But if you're needing to be, build your collection from a low base, you and I would both recommend go buy a raw one for $30 to $50. Grade it. It comes back a 5 or a 6 or 4 or 7. Doesn't matter. It's a nice piece in your collection.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that earlier today when I was kind of thinking about talking points, and it's just like definitely 58 on up, even 55, or let's just say 50s on up. Like the prices have gone up substantially, and it just seems like pre-war is lagging behind. And I think that that's like kind of, at least in my opinion, the most untapped era for people if they're looking to invest in cards. I just think like buying these Dixie D's for so cheap right now, like it's ridiculous to be able to get these cards. Like maybe the ridiculousness is being able to get the card for $30 to $50 raw. Like looking at it that way, you know what I mean? And so I agree that that's the way to go in comparison to that graded one. But it's interesting that those cards are so inexpensive when, like, what do you get for $50? Like you have to buy like a 1975 Pele to find something that's going to cost you $50. You know what I mean? It's just,
yeah. And especially now, I mean, the Pele market has really, it was always strong. It's always a leader of the hobby, but it's gotten, now where it's pretty common that a decent 1960s card is, getting close to $1,000. And that's probably a tenfold increase over where we were a year ago. So as people kind of get pushed out of the 58 rookie, market, they gravitate more to early 60s. They gravitate to the team cards. I mean, the Fottering, team card that went, what did that for? Like 3,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this one, if anybody's watching. Yeah, 3,000 for a team card, which has to be close to a record for a team card. And then the album that you didn't buy, remember the full album? I actually just got an email today from a guy in Germany, and it seems like the market price has kind of creeped up to 10,000 euros, but they are out here. This is my favorite from it.
Yep. Yep. The one where he's crying.
I really like out of this set. So, I think that all those Peles are going up. All those 60s, that San Giorgino, the 1962, I think went for like 1,000. The Cyan went for like 1,000. These are all, cards that would have been, well, maybe not the San Giorgino. That's always been a tough one, but $150, a year ago, and they've just been ratcheting up, auction after auction, and they haven't really slowed down. And I was thinking to myself actually yesterday, I'm like, wow, these prices are just too high on the Peles. And then I went and I looked a little bit about, the Babe Ruths. So if you believe that there's an equivalency a Babe Ruth versus, Pele, and then you start to see what these 1921, 22, 23, Babe Ruths are going for, and you're like, well, maybe that isn't crazy. Maybe $1,000 for a pretty rare, nice, Pele is, we should consider that still cheap. It's a hard shift for my brain to make right after 10 years of $100, $150. But when you look at it at a bigger level, which I've always struggled to do this year, there could be a pretty clear argument, to that. I mean, would you rather have that, or would you rather have some, I looked at what somebody paid for that Rashford, rookie, the yellow number to 10. It's a $6,000. And then if I had that versus some exceedingly scarce, beautiful Pele's, and I could have 6 of them, I'm going to take the rare Pele's, but I think that's one thing that is, he's the bellwether for the market, I think, not necessarily just the CR7, Messi rookies. I think that Pele is really driving he's the barometer for the vintage market.
Oh, 100%. Like, and I mean, so that's a great sign for everybody that's been buying vintage, and you just got to feel super comfortable with where you're at now. I mean, I grabbed a handful of cards the other day, and I was kind of flipping through them, and I'm like, this handful was probably $2,000 last year, and now it's like $20-some thousand, like minimum. Like, it's just crazy, like what stuff I kind of threw on the side, and now it's like, oh my god, like this is just insane, like the difference. And I mean, we've seen that, and it's not stopping anytime soon, I guess. But it'll be interested to see what happens over the winter. The holiday auctions, I'm never sure if those are getting pushed up or they get hurt.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I always thought that historically, I'm looking back, some of my best times to buy were around Thanksgiving weekend. I just found just a huge, everyone's with their families, all their wives are yelling at them if they're, on the computer buying shit, and then stuff that closes there, you could generally pick up, pretty well. And I haven't gone back and double checked, some of the same cards over the time, but I always felt like that was a good time. And I thought that because of the kind of economic crisis and the increase of COVID and a bunch of, in lack of clarity on the political situation and the economic situation, that we would, potentially see some decreases in December. But obviously those auctions went off, pretty well at Golden and HA, and there was some pretty solid, pricing, at least on the marquee cards. But now I kind of feel like these marquee cards, went up so fast, so quickly. And then we have on the Ronaldos and the Messis, some drops here. Pele's continue to go up. Maradona dies, so his actually, jump up a bit. Not as much as I kind of expected. I expected the 78 Maradona 3, which is pretty high grade for that card, to do better than it did last night at, like, what was it, 2,200 or something. So I kind of expected that to do better. The 77 disc, even at a 1.5, that'd be 4,500, something like that. So, you could make a case, depending on how you look at it, that's high price for a low grade card. It is, but at the same time, there's just not that many, and they're, he is a marquee player, and he should still be getting some of the I hate to say benefit, but his card prices, the attention of his passing, which is, I think kind of shocked everyone. So, I think that we are seeing some consolidation in the market. And then what the big unknown in my eyes is something you talked about, Vincent, from Card Hour, about, what these pops actually start to look like when people start to get a lot of their stuff back, and then how that supply affects the long term and the short term of the hobby. I mean, there's some hope to me that we get a lot of people flooded and people just feel like they need to sell things, and it's a great buying opportunity. I think in the long run, the supply, as you and I both know, is going to be so constrained by so many factors. So all you need is demand to go up a little bit more than the supply, and you'll end up with constant, increases, kind of like GE's earnings for like 20 years under Jack Welch. Like you could kind of bank on it. It was going to go slowly up. It was like managing the earnings, right? And so instead of these incredible peaks and valleys. So I think we've consolidated here. It's a solid base, definitely a new level for virtually every card. I think less than $10,000 alpha isn't going to happen, because the one last night, which was probably the worst one we've seen with like half the back ripped off, sells for 13.5. So I just can't see you getting an alpha for less than 10,000 anymore. So I think we've kind of set this new marker, and then from here, the healthier thing is slow growth over time. We know we're going to see a spike, in 2022, and we know we'll see another spike in 2026, because we've seen these spikes, since 2010. So anyway, those are just some of the bigger, thoughts that I have on the market.
Yeah, and just to follow up when you were talking about the spike in the population of some of the graded cards, I still don't think that's even really going to be but a blip, maybe not even a blip for vintage, right? Like, I mean, it's just, there's so few of them anyway. Like, everybody that we know could get a particular card graded, and it wouldn't be over 200 in a pop of a particular card. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't think.
I'd say, yeah, definitely 200, right? But like, if it's been a while since I've been checking, pops carefully. But if you said, like, let's take remember when the PSA 8 Zidane went for like 20,000, and then it didn't get paid, and it got relisted, and people are like, whoa, it's kind of like this thing. I think around then there was like maybe 50 PSA graded, if I recall right. When you see events like that, and like what I think we've seen this year with the alpha, it seems like there's an alpha up every week or two, because there's so many in collections that as soon as people heard that they were worth money, they were trying to take the gains. They were cashing. At some point, most of those are going to get absorbed, and I think the supply is going to dry up, and it's going to be harder to get. That's my hypothesis. But I also, it also has the same thing. Like, you get, how many Zidanes are going to come out that haven't been graded and get, graded. If that number is, 50, 100, even 150, I think we're fine. I think if it ends up being 500, which I would be shocked, because you and I have been around enough I probably would have seen them, right? I would be worried. So I think there is some, amount of, there could be, too many. I don't think that will happen, but it's a risk, right? And it's a risk, like how you guys were talking about that. Why some people just like numbered cards. They want to know exactly how many are out there, and they want to, calibrate off of those. We don't know. There's what, 60, 70 alphas maybe graded, and so what if that number turned into 400? The market could absorb them, yeah, but probably not at the prices that we'd be seeing now, because you get it would just be real hard to, at least from my perspective, see the market and the buyers that we have in the market sustain 400 alphas. I don't think there are, by the way. It's just
right. Being like, yeah, I agree with that, but I think there would have to be that they would all have to come out in a chunk. You know what I mean? Like, where, like, a block of time, like, let's say there's 20 of them released in like a 2-month period or something like that, then I could see where maybe we see it affect it very short term, I think. Because
if there was a black swamp find, you know what that is in baseball? Yeah. So like, if they went to, they found some box, and they came out and they, found, 200 of these near pristine condition Pele's. I mean, I think it would obviously hurt if I'm holding a PSA 3 or 4, right? Yeah, again, the probability of this is very low, but it does happen from time to time. And if if it happened to, that was a big set. So if they found a big stash, it wouldn't be like all Pele's. It would be, there's so many other cards in the set. So there's probably not even a ton of risk to something like that. But I think in most of the stuff that we, look at, there is some risk of increased supply. It's just the matter of demand's going to, outstrip it. And I think that it's pretty safe to say yes, still, even at these market prices that we see today.
Yeah, I mean, long term, even if that is the case, long term, it's not even an issue. But if you're looking for, like, if you are looking to flip or do something like that, or take a short term gain or something like that, you might be challenged. Yeah. So, all right. So let's pretty much everything pre-war. I'm just going to kind of flip through some of these auctions that I had saved. Like the pre-war, I mean, you're getting Stanley Matthews for $200, things like that. Like, it's quite low in my opinion. When you're just looking at comparison to other eras, you get up to like Duncan Edwards rookie, which you don't see a ton of those out there, and decent grades for sure. That one for $200. Now we get back up into like the Puskas, and then the Idolos from 55, which those still seem to go quite low.
Especially given the stature of all those players, Milton Santos to John myself Santos.
Yeah.
I think all of those guys are, if you don't have those in your collection, I would definitely advocate. I mean, if you like, Brazilian players, I think those were all really, really solid pickups at these prices.
For sure, because both of those were like Milton Santos and Gilmar, I think, were like $100 or less for each of them. And then the DD was $150, which dropped from the previous PWCC, which went for a couple hundred, which is just interesting to me. I would think that, if anything, those sort of cards or the lower dollar would actually be the ones that start to get that bump.
I think that one thing that people will have to get used to in soccer in general is, because there's not the volume of transactions as some of the other sports have, you're going to have some volatility, because you only have to pay $2 more than the next closest bid. So if there were like 3 people that wanted the card and one of them got it last time, then there's still 2 people that wanted the card. Then the reserve price, you may have some of this ratcheting down from time to time. My general suggestion is figure out what you want to pay ahead of time, what you think things are worth. Maybe you decide, hey, this is really low on my priority list, so I set low bids, and if I get it, hey, I'm happy, right? I'm surprised, but I'm happy. And then you pick the few things you really want to go strong after, and that way you can take advantage of the volatility instead of being a victim of it.
Yep, I dig that. That's it's just hard to do that anyway, because then you don't get your emotion involved when you're like trying to bid for a second and that sort of thing. You can just sit back and enjoy the ride and see what happens. So I've run into that in previous years, where I just kind of go, okay, I'm going to see what I can get, what I can bid, and then I wasn't a high bidder, so then I start to bid more, and then I bid more, and then like now I'm 40% higher than what I wanted to bid in the first place, and you're taking the logic out of it, putting the emotion in because you want to win, and then not be as great of a purchase as it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and you need to. I mean, at least I would recommend have that discipline. Like the you can imagine my house when we were talking about the 57 Pele, and there was a lot of emotion going on there, and we had discussed it at length beforehand, and so the reserve was done. I mean, like, we had blown through the reserve, and there's 2 people ahead, and there were discussions, but still that's the unideal situation, right?
Right.
We had already decided, hey, we're going to go up to here. then that gets passed, and 9 times out of 10, then I just say, okay, well, that's what we had decided, so you live with it, and you win some, you lose some. You can't win them all, right? So that was a little bit different, and it's just unique because we've been trying to track that thing down forever, and just happened to have a good November, and happened to have it, and it was presented it, and that was the last bid we were making, and that was it, and you win it and felt great about it. So you can, but I just wouldn't recommend that most people bid that way. I think you can get yourself into some deep trouble, and you can lose a lot of money if you go about it that way, letting the emotion get the best of you.
Well, and I think that it sometimes depends on how accessible it is, right? Like if it's something you see every month in a PWCC auction, I mean, it makes more sense to be, more structured, more disciplined. But when's the next time you're going to have the opportunity to buy a particular Pele? Like, the opportunity is there, so sometimes you have to go beyond your level. So
yeah,
it's a different game.
Or it's just something you hadn't seen, or been looking for, and you just don't want to. You want to stop looking for it because that also takes time, right? It's effort to spend hours scouring eBay and all these other global sites looking for something, and there is some value to checking it off your box today. If it's one of the more scarce things, right? If it's a Mundi Chromo Messi PSA 7, you'll probably see another one of those, here shortly. So don't pay twice what the most recent comp was.
Yep, exactly. So then we kind of roll into the 58s, and then we have that Gazeta, Pele's, Garrincha next to him. That's from that album cover, and those are like $100,000. So to get a 58 that's slabbed as a 58, I mean, you can't do much better than that really anymore. So that was a conversation I kind of had in the Discord last night. Is that a card? Is it a card meant to be cut out and graded as a card?
Well, it's a collectible from 1958 of Pele, of when he won the World Cup. So, certainly, like myself, I'd prefer to have an Aquarella, right?
For sure.
But that seems like that's not accessible anymore. With I think, where did the 4 go last night? Like 4,500.
Yep, and the one went for almost 2,000.
2,000, right? So for a one, now I think that was a decent one.
Yeah, it looked good.
So if you only have $1,000 and you want, and it's cool, it's a great photo. It's actually similar to the same as the Americana photo, but it has having him next to Garrincha and those photos. I mean, it is cool, right? It's one of the more cool looking collectibles from 1958. So I'm never going to fault anyone for whatever they like, right? So go get the stuff you like. That's number one message that I think we always both preach to people.
It's 1958. It is Pele, so there's no arguing that. So
yeah,
whether the intention was for it to be that, I mean, the market dictates, and people are paying $1,000 for it. So that's our answer.
Yeah. And if you find one that you really like and you have $1,000 and that's the visually appealing one, go get it.
I did find it interesting that there's the some of them are Pele, and then there's the ones with and then graded very similarly, but the Pele is much cleaner. And from what I recall, I don't know if I had that saved. Yeah, it sold for double. So the one with Garrincha, there was a one that sold for $960, one that sold for $1,100, and then there was one where Garrincha was not part of it that was also that sold for $2,100. So, and at first I was like, well, why is that? But the argument really is like, well, the photo is way cleaner than on the other two. Pele had like a lot of paper loss on his face.
Yeah.
And my first initially I was like, well, that's kind of like a record where if they cut the off and then you just have the Pele, like should be selling for less because that was intended to be both of them. But that's not the case with these cards. The Pele,
Yeah, I personally prefer them both on them, but I understand
like it was made for both of them.
Yeah, and but on the record, and I don't happen to have one here handy, but I think there's some dotted lines on the reverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, the intention of record, right, was to have them, cut, down the middle and be independent cards, because I think the printing is more or less the same on both sides of the back, if I'm, visually getting this. So, I myself, I prefer those with the red, border on the side. I just think it looks sharper, and I prefer them uncut. But again, these are preferences, right?
Yeah.
So I think you just don't know what other people's preferences are. At some point, there will be a gravitation of the market to one thing or another. It certainly feels like, in these the Gazette, Pele, that at least based on these auctions, people like. Although it's hard because they had paper loss, I think so it's really hard to know like what people are thinking.
Yeah.
In time the market will speak. You remember there was a time when the market spoke that the Quiggle was the best Pele rookie card for at least a couple of years, I'd say. And then that kind of flip flopped to the Alfie, and that happens again, or something else takes over. Who knows? Because we don't control the market. But yeah, those 58s were, I'd say, in general, for the condition adjusted, I'd say those were pretty strong results. I felt like I wasn't gonna be a bidder on those at those prices right now.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing that popped up was the titulares, and that was a pretty beat one. I think there's a lot of paper loss on the back.
Yeah, you could see through it, and I think there was actually a hole that like went all the way through, and that's pretty much where I draw the line.
Yeah, and that went for $2,000. So like that just shows you, because like we were talking about that in a previous episode where we saw a ton of those earlier in the game than this year, where there was not a ton, but like a fair amount of them popped up, and then then they went kind of extinct. And so this is the first one I think is a full auction that has ended in quite a while.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, I actually do believe that the titulares, they haven't come up much, but I actually believe that they have some legs on them. I think they've just been dried up. They're sitting in collections. If you get a decent one without paper loss, yeah, this one has literally a hole in it, still lots of glue, and his face is mangled too. And it's the 50, it's the number 50 card as opposed to the 86. So that was if it's a placeholder, that card for me until you get a nicer one. I don't know if you had seen that, not in a PWCC, but there was a team card that sold December 20th, and it was a 2 or a 3, BVG 3, and it sold for 900. So that's the team card that somebody was mentioning the other day, that like you can't really see. Yeah, they're there, but you can't see clearly their faces or anything. So I think that the titulares will definitely have some legs if they come out to market. That to me is those are preferable cards than some of the other stuff. Even I'd take those over the Aquarellas or stuff like that if they have a cleaner back.
So this is something I wanted to ask you, because you brought it up about the 50 and the 86 from the titulares, and like, at least from my experience as an American collector, oftentimes if there were cards released in the same set, the first card in the set was deemed the rookie card, like in the count order, so the earlier one in the series. So like when I did hockey cards, a lot of times they had like international cards in it as well as like, their team card. And so like whatever card was first in the set was kind of deemed the first card for whatever reason. So I know it's ultimately preference, and I mean I'm not, but does that ever come into your process at all?
Not for me. For me, it's about aesthetics and relative rarity, perceptions, right? And so, I and there aren't that many sets that have multiple cards in soccer, right? And certainly in Negro League, other stuff that I collect in boxing, for that matter, as well. So I don't really come into contact with that much, but it doesn't really that doesn't resonate with me about the first card number being the most attractive.
Okay, and I think maybe I didn't say that properly, but like let me, as a better example, like you have the regular set. So like let's say there's a set that was made in 1984, and then you have 1984 update set, right? That was made at the end of the season to take into account any sort of transactions that happened during the year. So maybe there was a rookie that came in and finally got his card made. Well, the 1984 is going to be deemed as rookie, but the 1984 update will not quite be considered his rookie. So that's kind of a, like, at least in this situation, you have the titulares, and then you have a supplemental that was added after the fact. So the 50, in theory, was made earlier than the 86. And
the 86 is not the supplement. There's the 50 and the 86 both come out of the exact same album, and then there's a supplemental album, and that has
no, yeah, you're right. That's the one with all those circle photos on it.
Okay, no, so that's actually a different one. There's here, I'll pull one here.
Okay. Look at it. We're taking Build a Class right now.
Yeah, so here's one. It's not a Pele, but here's a Milton Santos. So some of you may have seen these.
Okay, that's where my brain was getting confused. I do like the 86 better. It's a sharper.
No. This is the Queagle supplement.
Yeah, that's Queagle. Yeah.
Titulare supplement does have those little circles.
Yeah, I know the one, and it has like all those, and it doesn't even have their names or anything on them. It's just a circle. So, yeah, that's where I was confusing. For some reason, I was lumping the 86 as a supplemental. So, yeah, that doesn't disregard the last 5 minutes of me asking these questions.
There's a 19. Let me see if I have an 86 around here. Okay, so just so people are here, so this is what the this isn't the Paleo, this is a Grincha. So this is what the
86
thing is, and then the supplemental and the titulares look like this. They're parts of these little heads.
And Pele happens to be on 2 cards because it's like half of the base.
Yeah, so and I think they started grading them and saying Pele, and it's like half of Pele's face, they should say. So I wouldn't buy that, right? And then this is the 86.
Yeah.
And there's 3 different versions of this.
With the autograph, without it.
And then with the star, up here. On my Instagram, I kind of walk people through the differences. But anyway, so those are, these were all in the same album. So whether it's the horizontal 50 that sold for 2,000 or this one, which I haven't seen up for auction in a while.
Yeah.
86. They're just in the same album.
All right. Yeah, that's my bad. But
no.
It's still information that's important for everybody. So probably not these superstars in the chat, but yeah. All right. So then after that, we get into the Aquarela, and actually the 4 went for $7,000.
The 4 went for $7,000?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a big price. I mean, it's a hard card to get in good grade, and a 4 is a good grade. So I'm not knocking that, but that's really high, price for that card, at least traditionally. Maybe it's hitting a new plateau.
Yeah, that was actually second high on the 1. I bid like 18 something, and it went for Like that, it wasn't even one for a bid above my bid. So, missed out on that one, but it's a 1. But it was a sharp looking one.
It was a good looking one, yeah. And that's the other thing that, you know, with the soccer cards, and actually any card, you really want to carefully look at, you know, how you look and feel about the card, right? Not just the grade, because I think you know, we had a 1 sell last thing for like 1,000 or something.
Yeah,
And
it was,
completely destroyed, right?
Yep.
So you know, you do. I think you do need to put eye appeal in there, especially if you're a collector and even an investor. I think, you know, you got to know that a better looking one's going to sell for more than a thrashed one.
Yep. So then we had the Quiggle went for 5,100. That was a PSA 1. That wasn't in great condition.
That was missing a top corner and the back thrashed.
Yeah, it looked like a mouse got to it or something. But then we get into, like, at least these are just talking points that I saved. The Panini Eusebio, the PSA 8 went for $5,000.
How did you feel like that?
I'm okay with it. I think it's really hard to get those in really good condition. I think that's another one of those cards where, like, getting anything over a 4 is pretty phenomenal. A lot of them are folded in half. Like, I have one of them that has a crease right across the middle. I have another one that looks a lot better, you know. So we'll see. Like, they're both in for grading right now. We'll see what happens, but I'll be happy with the 4, honestly. So to get like an 8 is, and I've seen a couple of them that were graded highly like that, but I mean, he's one of those top 15 players that you have to, you know, if you want to collect all those, that's one of them you're gonna add to your collection. So
yeah, I really like. You know, the blank back one isn't my favorite. I much prefer if it has a Valida back.
Yeah.
And then the other one that's eluded me for all these years is, you know, most of them have this blue nameplate. There's some rare ones that no one's been able to explain to me why, that come up with a yellow nameplate, and I've just, it's always eluded me, and I've tried to add that one. Now, just so you know, just like in the, I mean, I know you know, but you know, there are a number of stickers that are pre, you know, this is his first Panini, which I know matters to some people. I'm not exactly sure why. But there are a number of stickers that predate that are issued in Portugal. So this is one of those where I feel like, okay, this is probably going to some high end, you know, investor who's paying $5,000 for that card. And I'm not saying that it's a bad investment, because it's in Eusebio. Most people will gravitate. It's easy to understand. It's Panini. It's excellent shape. But, you know, for me, I'd rather have a PSA 1 or 2 earlier stickers in you know, issued in Portugal. You know, that said, I bid on the Valida and I love those cards, so if I can see them, I get them. And I think I bid maybe $1,000 on the 8, just wondering if I could get lucky. Clearly I did not. So, you know, I felt good. I felt strong. I felt nice to see some recognition of the player that he was, right? That made me happy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we're never going to get a precise answer, right? Like with this, we know Panini's not his first card, but at the same time, it might be the first major set that issue that he's a part of. So, like, we've seen that with like I always screw it up with the 59 or 60. Somebody taught me how to say it. I can't. Nile.
Yeah, Heiner.
That's what I've always said is Heinerly, but I'm
my German isn't very good, you know.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of the Romance languages, so it's hard to. We know you, Al. But yeah, I mean, like, so I think that's part of it. But I agree. Like, I mean, their PSA 1 went for 300. Like, I'm totally fine buying that for that price. Like, that's a great card to add to your collection, especially like in that range. Like,
yeah, and it was an attractive one. You know, again, there are ones and there are ones, and that was a nice one.
Yeah. And now we get to the at least where I am. I'm jumping up to the Maradonas. So we had the one that was completely like cut, like altered. That went for like $550.
Yeah, that to me was just a little bit away from the trash can.
Yeah, I mean it looked, but it, and this is kind of goes back to that one, the Aquarela, the 58 Aquarela, where that might be the only one you're able to buy. And so I totally get bidding on something like that just to say that you have a 77 Maradona, because like if you're not going to fork out $4 or $5 for a 1.5,
Yeah,
everybody's got like different levels of finances, I guess. So I mean, I can get it.
I agree. I just think that there are other ones that show up on eBay that can still be in that price range if you're just patient. At least there had been. So maybe there's a new plateau for Maradona. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So maybe and then if you're scared of that or you think there is, then picking up any copy is better than not having one. But except for the rarest of the rare, I think that I always have a condition line where I'm like, okay, it's just no matter what, I'm not gonna,
I can buy that. It's it was obviously somebody tried to pull that out of an album or something, and then they must have torn the top, so then they decided to try to cut it, and it's just
there were so many things wrong. Like I've seen so many of those, and I just looked at it and I'm like, oh, painful, right? It really hurt me to look at that, wondering about the road, because I always wonder about the roads of the cards that they take. So but on the flip side, that 1.5 was a very attractive 1.5.
Yep, it did look good, it looked clean, and like we were talking about in the Discord last night, a lot of times, you just have to accept that some of these cards are never going to be graded highly, and it's just the way they were printed. The registration oftentimes is jacked up. I mean, that's the same thing even with the Paninis. Like a lot of those Paninis, the Eusebio, the registration of the colors isn't good, and you almost see like it almost has that 3D effect, where you have to put 3D glasses on to see what it actually looks like. And
sometimes like the PSAs will still grade those high, even though you're like, whoa, which Maradona is it? It's like kind of shifted off.
Yeah.
It just looks crappy. So I'd rather have this nice 1.5 where it's a nice register, nice image, clean, nice colors than one of those that may grade a 3 or a 4 that's going to be like kind of off center and a little fuzzy. And that's, but that 3 or 4 is always going to sell for more, just because that's the nature of collecting now.
Yeah, that's the way of the world now, right? Like, which is good or bad depending on how you are looking at it. It's going to be good that you might be able to buy something at a lower grade for less, but maybe some of the things that you prefer aren't going to sell for quite as high.
Yeah, and there was that Pele, what was it, 1961, I think, which is a PSA 1, and it was, I mean, just beautiful PSA 1, right? I love cards like that because the prices are low, but the eye appeal is high, and you have a copy of the card. And personally, I've never been a PSA 10 need to have the highest graded type of thing. It's more like I got a copy that I really enjoy looking at, and I can save a whole lot of money versus something else. So but to each their own, right? If you want a certain number, you're looking for all VG collection or whatever, you do you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, everything we say is just our personal preference, and it doesn't mean that we're correct. We've been wrong before, we'll be wrong again, and preference isn't right or wrong answer anyway. So don't listen to yourself. And I guess the last topic we can go over real quick is the Messies. So we saw a lot of Messies last night, and a lot of them seem to go pretty inexpensively in comparison to what they had been going for the previous 2, 3, 4 months. So I mean, it's been a topic that we discussed last night, but maybe just, give me your opinion on that situation, as of now.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. So, I think in the long term, if you're buying any of these Messis in this area, you'll likely be happy. But I do somewhat worry short term if there's still some additional downside for some of the reasons that we talked about, yesterday, especially on non 71 bis. Because I mean, I was shocked when I was talking to another collector friend, and he told me he had submitted 50 of the other Mega Cracks ones, and I'm like, wow. I mean, you just had 50 sitting around. It's like, yeah, I was buying them for $10, for the last decade, and I just finally decided to send them into PSA. But this was in March or April, and so he still doesn't have them back because he was like the extra slow, service. So I do wonder how many of them are out there and have been submitted through time, as certainly the early part of the year, which a lot of people still don't have theirs back. So if that affects the pop reports, I think there could be some short-term downside, especially with all the chaos that Barcelona is right now, and the fact that he's not having a great year. And if they get dumped, out of the Champions League early, I think it's just, people want the guy who's scoring the goals now. In the end, these are going to be massively important soccer cards. And, if I was sitting on the sidelines over the last, year or so, wondering if I was going to get one of these cards, I kind of feel like, again, talk to your financial advisor, talk to your spouse, make sure you have the money. Don't spend your rent money. But, if I was going to stretch and I wanted one of these cards or all of them, I think now would be a good time to stretch over the next, 3 to 4 months. Because I do think we'll see some continued softness. And I do think that, it's going to be, we'll look back on this as a really good, buying on. Again, we see the difference in the PSA 8 sold for it's like 6,500. I think the two of those, and then you had the BGS 8 selling for 4,000. So there's still a huge demand difference for the PSA label as opposed to the Beckett label, which I think a lot of people are of the opinion that it's probably gotten too wide. It used to be a little bit, and now it's become like a gulf. So which we talked about, I think, last time. So that still continues. And, kind of depends which side of the fence you're on that. But, I didn't buy any last night. I got outbid on the sticker again. I've been huge on the sticker. I know you're big on the Mundi Chromos. I put a lot of bids because there's so many of them closing that you don't want to win all of them, right? But I had lowish bids, and I didn't end up with any of them. And I would have been happy if I would have won them all, if at my price, which was only a little bit below where they went. And in retrospect, when the smoke clears on PWCC and I stuff I bid on and all the stuff that I lost, I go through and I said, man, I would have loved to have been the buyer of this one or the other one.
Yeah.
On the Maradona 78-3, I really would have liked that. I mean, even the 77 Maradona would have taken, and a whole bunch of Messis. I'd be backing the truck up and saying, load them in. If you have the capital, because
sure,
no question that 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, he's absolutely still going to be one of the most amazing guys to ever play the world's most important sport. So, I know Cristiano won whatever footballer of the century 20 years into the century, which is bizarre. But and he's great, and I love him. His sticker went for 12,500 last night, which in a BGS 9.5, which surprised me. So he's getting a little bit of a bump, whereas I'd say last March they were all pretty close. Messi took off, Cristiano went up a little bit, but there was a big gap, and now Messi's coming down and Cristiano's going up a little bit. So, that's kind of how I see it. But I'd be, we had a couple people in your Discord about they bought a lot of Messis, and I think it's absolutely the right call. We said to do that last month too.
Yep. Yeah, it's it's an interesting time for these players because they are at the end of their careers. So you're always going to see at some point where I'm not saying Messi's fallen off, but he's not going to be the Messi that we saw when he was 26 years old or 2012, something like that. Like, that's just the case. Like, things change, teams change, his desire to be where he is might have changed. There's just so many different things that could have affected this. And then, like, you have the people who are still collecting current players, and that's their focus is performance. That's what drives their excitement of collecting certain players because they're doing well. And so those collectors are maybe affecting the overall value of his cards at the moment. But yeah, like you said, when you take a step back and the dust settles, he's going to be arguably the best player of all time. And I don't think you're going to have a lot of people arguing that. I don't think you have a lot of people arguing that he's not the best player of the last quarter century. Like, you might fall back into Zidane or something like that. Like, that might be like the next argument, but there's different players and different types of players, and that's okay. But, you usually want the goal scorers, and he's proven that he is, he's the most prolific goal scorer. Like, and, he scored the 91 in a calendar year. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that, these are just going to be, the stalwarts of the hobby. And yes, tops are going to go up. But again, as somebody mentioned, you've got this global sport, and let's say we end up with, 10,000 Messi rookies, something that I think is not even going to be anywhere remotely possible. But let's just say that we did. That's going to be half of the Jordan rookies, of just 86 Fleer, by the way. So, and here I'm including 10,000 of all of the, Campeones, all of the stickers and everything. You get 10,000, and you got 10,000 Fleer just by PSA. And now you see that card, even though it's relatively common, trading for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I think that if you have a long-term view, or you're going to, looking for something to give your godson or something, a nice Messi rookie at his baptism, slide that, under, just put it in the safe, have him wake up, 20 years later, you're just going to be ecstatic that was one of the collectibles that you pulled. And, if you could do that, I look at this and I say, hey, the Rashford gold numbered to 10, Prism, or a Messi rookie PSA 8 trade for the same amount. To me, again, maybe I'm just risk adverse, but all day long, that's the easiest decision that I have to make.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's always, that's the battle of the new cards versus old cards kind of thing. And like, when I own a card shop, that was so the case. Like, it was just crazy. Like, you get the new hot rookie or a new young hot player, and at least Rashford's shown that he can do something. There's a lot of guys that sell for a ridiculous amount that have done nothing. And like, I'm not saying that I would even blink before I decided between, the Messi or the Rashford. But like, that being the case, so many of those players, when I own this card shop, people would pay $500. Deshaun Stevenson is the guy that pops in my head because he was a 18-year-old that came into the NBA. Everybody was so like, he's going to be the next Jordan. Within we pulled a card that we sold for $500 to $700, which was a lot back then, and like within a year, it was worthless. Like,
yeah, I mean, and we could go back. I mean, we've been around the block, more than we would like to admit, and you could go back and just recreate. I'm just going back to some of my baseball days. Like, I bought Teddy Higuera. I like 1987. I thought he was going to be a great pitcher, right? So, and pitchers are hard in baseball anyway. But I mean, there's William Green in football. He was a first drafted running back, played for the Browns. I thought he was going to bring the Browns back, right? So, and all of those are just in the waste bin.
Yeah.
And then you can get lucky and get the right one, and it's fun. It is fun, like you and Vincent were talking about the other day. It's fun because you feel like you have some skin in the game when you're watching the games, and that is fun. And that's the way I look at if I play that market, and I do, maybe 5% of the stuff that I do, just that I see it as entertainment money, as opposed to, truly investing, because it's just a crapshoot, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, just think of all those people that spent like a ton of money on players, like even guys who turned out decent. Who's the pitcher that was for Kansas City and then he went to Arizona? Or no, who was the pitcher for the Washington?
Strasburg.
Yeah, and people paid like a stupid amount of money for his 1 of 1 and his like chrome autograph rookie or whatever. And what's that worth now? But if you bought Mike Trout, like then it's the other way. But it's just like it just seems super volatile to me, and that's just not how my brain works. Like I think being in finance and all that sort of thing, just my brain works in a different way. And weighing the risks, and it just seems like that's like playing penny stocks in a way to me. And so that's like just not where my brain's at. So but yeah, I mean, teach their own, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just not where my brain and how it works.
And people will make a ton of money on a few of these players, but most of them will be complete busts, and you'll lose everything. Or almost like you're saying. I'm sure Rashford will always have a collecting, base, and he'll do well, to some extent. And but I don't. $6,000 isn't a bet I'm gonna take with that, or even the Mape that went for 110,000 to 10. That Prism, last, when was that? A few months ago. I'd rather put it in a Pele, and that's what I'm doing. I'm putting, more money than I imagined into, some Pele cards.
Agreed. I think that's a good way to stop this. I think that cements our position on vintage versus new. And Al, thanks again for joining. I love doing these. It's a fun conversation every time, and
yeah, it's awesome, Bill. And thanks. It's been fun to kind of take it off of these forums and make it live, make some videos, get on the Discord. The engagement's been super fun for me. So thank you for it's been great to get back together after all these years and share the same passion. So very fun, and very thankful that this is one of the great things that came out of what otherwise was a tough 2020.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, thanks for everybody that joined us, man. That was a good rocking crowd, and we'll take this messy Ronaldo conversation to the Discord. Thanks everybody for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.
All right, take care.
I don't know what happened.